Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the news from SABA satellite channel from Arab. Here are tonight's top stories.
President Al-Alimi called for a stronger international support and national unity, warns against Houthi escalation.
Government and World Bank advance investment and reform agenda.
Information Minister warns of escalating threats to Red Sea shipping.
Welcome back. President of the Presidential Leadership Council, Dr. Rashad Al-Alimi, reaffirmed the importance of closer international cooperation to safeguard Red Sea security and confront growing regional threats. During a farewell meeting with India's ambassador to Yemen, Suhail Ijaz Khan, President Al-Alimi praised India's support for Yemen's unity, sovereignty and stability, stressing the need for continued coordination on protecting international waterways and respecting state sovereignty. The president warned that attempts by the Houthi militia to expand the conflict in support of the Iranian regime threaten not only Yemen, but also the security of Red Sea nations and Asian countries that rely on one of the world's busiest maritime trade routes, including India. He also called on the international community to recognize the Houthi militia as part of a broader regional threat network, citing reports of growing cooperation with terrorist groups and armed factions in the Horn of Africa, arms smuggling, and activities that endanger international shipping and global supply chains.
And during a meeting with the leadership of the Consultation and Reconciliation Commission, President Rashad Al-Alimi stressed the government's commitment to protecting state sovereignty while pursuing a just and lasting peace. The president reviewed the latest political, security and military developments, stressing the importance of national unity and confronting the continued escalation by the Houthi militia. President Al-Alimi said the government acted responsibly to safeguard national sovereignty, protect civilians and support humanitarian initiatives that respect the authority of the Yemeni state. He emphasized that peace remains the government's strategic objective, but any future settlement must restore state institutions, ensure equal rights for all Yemenis, and end the existence of armed groups acting outside state control. The president also highlighted ongoing economic and institutional reforms, praising Saudi Arabia's continued political, economic and humanitarian support alongside international partners in strengthening state institutions and promoting stability.
In Hadramaut, member of the Presidential Leadership Council and Hadramaut Governor Salim Al-Khambashi chaired a high-level meeting aimed at strengthening coordination among military and security units to safeguard stability across the governorate. The meeting reaffirmed the full readiness of the armed forces and security agencies to respond to any escalation by the Houthi militia, while supporting efforts to restore state institutions and reinforce national stability. Participants also discussed coordinated measures to counter security threats and reviewed government efforts to resume oil exports, describing them as vital to supporting the national economy and strengthening public revenues.
Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs Dr. Shaya Mohsen Al-Zindani discussed expanding cooperation with the World Bank to support economic reforms and improve essential services. During meeting in Aden with World Bank Country Manager for Yemen, Dina Abu Ghaida, the Prime Minister highlighted the government's reform agenda with particular emphasis on developing long-term solutions for the electricity sector. He praised the World Bank's continued support for economic recovery, institutional development and public services, calling for broader cooperation on sustainable projects to modernize infrastructure and strengthen public institutions. For her part, Abu Ghaida reaffirmed the World Bank's commitment to supporting the government's priority programs, including electricity projects, institutional capacity building, and initiatives aimed at accelerating economic recovery and improving basic services.
On the diplomatic front, the government called on the International Civil Aviation Organization to take action over serious violations of the country's sovereign airspace. In a formal letter delivered to ICAO's leadership in Montreal, Prime Minister Shaya Zindani condemned the unauthorized entry and landing of an Iranian aircraft without approval from the legitimate government. The government described the incident as a breach of Yemen's sovereignty and a violation of international law and the Chicago Convention governing international civil aviation. The letter urged ICAO to uphold its responsibilities in ensuring respect for national airspace and reaffirmed Yemen's right under international law and the UN Charter to take legitimate measures to protect its sovereignty.
Defense Minister Lieutenant General Tahir Al-Uqaili reaffirmed that the armed forces remain at the highest level of combat and operational readiness to defend the Republic and restore state institutions. In a statement, the minister welcomed President Rashad Al-Alimi's call for national unity behind the armed forces and all military formations in carrying out their constitutional duties. Al-Uqaili said the military remains committed to protecting the country's sovereignty, preserving national institutions, and safeguarding Yemen by land, sea, and air. He also urged residents in areas under the control of the Houthi militia not to allow their children to be recruited into the conflict, describing it as a war that serves external interests rather than the interests of the Yemeni people.
Information Minister Muammar al-Eryani warned that the Houthi militia's so-called blockade for blockade campaign is part of a broader Iranian strategy to escalate tensions and threaten international maritime security. In a statement, al-Eryani said the move was not driven by domestic developments, but reflected a decision by the Iranian regime to expand the conflict into the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb Strait, to disrupt global shipping and create new leverage against the international community. He condemned the Houthi militia for creating a travel crisis after rejecting proposals to resume civilian flights, including government initiatives and an offer by Royal Jordanian Airlines to operate services to Sana'a Airport, arguing that the issue was used to justify further escalation. The minister said the Houthi militia's actions threaten freedom of navigation, global energy supplies, and international trade, stressing that Yemenis seek peace, the restoration of state institutions, and an end to the conflict, rather than further regional escalation.
The National Coalition of Political Parties expressed full support for the recent address by President Rashad Al-Alimi and the outcomes of the National Defense Council meeting. In a statement, the coalition reaffirmed its backing for the armed forces and security institutions in carrying out their constitutional responsibilities, calling on all political parties, tribal leaders, youth, and civil society to unite behind efforts to restore state institutions. The coalition welcomed the government's decision to resume oil exports, describing it as an important step toward strengthening public finance and improving services of citizens. It also praised Saudi Arabia's continued support for Yemen and called on the international community to move beyond statements of concern by supporting the implementation of United Nations Security Council Resolution 2216 and efforts to restore stability.
On the diplomatic front, the Yemeni government welcomed Saudi Arabia's reaffirmation of its support for Yemen's legitimate government, while calling for stronger international action against threats to regional security and international shipping. In a statement, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs praised the kingdom's continued political, economic, and humanitarian assistance, describing it as vital to supporting state institutions, easing the humanitarian situation, and advancing efforts toward a comprehensive and just peace. The ministry also welcomed Saudi Arabia's rejection of false Houthi claims that the kingdom is imposing a blockade on Yemen, noting that Saudi ports have continued to facilitate the flow of food, fuel, and humanitarian supplies, while supporting the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 2216. The Foreign Ministry also reiterated its support for Saudi Arabia's measures to protect its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and maritime security.
In continued regional reaction against the Houthi militia's escalation, Gulf and Arab countries strongly condemned recent statements by the Houthi militia targeting Saudi Arabia, reaffirming their support for the kingdom and calling for stronger international action to protect regional security and freedom of navigation. The Gulf Cooperation Council, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and Jordan rejected the Houthi false allegations against Saudi Arabia and denounced threats to international shipping in the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The statements stress that freedom of navigation is a fundamental principle of international law and urge the international community to enforce relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions, including resolutions of Yemen and 2216 or on maritime 2722 security. They also reaffirmed their solidarity with Saudi Arabia and support for measures to safeguard its sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity, while emphasizing the importance of protecting international trade routes and advancing a comprehensive political solution to the conflict in Yemen.
Also, in regional security developments, the Arab coalition in Yemen says it has implemented operational measures to protect maritime traffic through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait in response to threats posed by the Houthi militia. Coalition spokesperson Major General Turki al-Maliki said the measures are being carried out in accordance with the international laws and UN conventions. He rejected Houthi claims that Yemen's ports and airports are under blockade, noting that more than 300 commercial ships carrying food, fuel, construction materials, and other goods entered the ports of Hodeidah, As-Salif, and Ras Isa during the first half of this year. Al-Maliki also accused the Houthi militia of shutting down Sana'a International Airport by destroying Yemeni aircraft and rejecting initiatives to resume civilian flights. He warned that any threats targeting vessels transiting from the Bab el-Mandeb Strait would be met with a firm response, describing such attacks as acts of maritime piracy under international law.
The United Nations has voiced deep concern over renewed Houthi threats against Saudi Arabia and international maritime navigation, warning that the developments could fuel broader regional instability. Through a press briefing, the spokesman of United Nations said that the United Nations is urging immediate de-escalation, renewed dialogue, and full compliance with Security Council resolutions aimed at protecting commercial shipping in the Red Sea.
Also, on a related note, that we've seen the reports and are very much concerned by the renewed Houthi threats against Saudi Arabia, against freedom of navigation, which leads to the risk of an even wider regional escalation. We call for immediate de-escalation. We urge all parties to address their differences through dialogue and diplomacy, and reiterate that Security Council Resolution 2722 and subsequent resolutions related to Houthi attacks against merchants and commercial vessels must be fully respected.
He added that United Nations Special Envoy for Yemen Hazi Grandberg is in Muscat for talks after concluding a visit to Riyadh, where he met President Rashad al-Alimi and several regional and international political leaders.
Their discussions focused on the need for the de-escalation, for the parties to agree on a way forward to preserve the gains of the 2022 UN-brokered truce. The Special Envoy also stressed the importance of insulating Yemen from the wider regional escalation and for safeguarding the space for an inclusive Yemeni-led political process and to end the conflict comprehensively.
Turning to economy, Minister of Planning and International Cooperation Afrah Al-Zuba held talks with a joint delegation from the World Bank and the International Finance Corporation to strengthen investment, expand private sector opportunities, and support economic reforms. The meeting reviewed ways to improve Yemen's investment climate, align development programs with government priorities, and enhance institutional coordination to maximize the impact of ongoing projects. The minister also called for a stronger role for the International Finance Corporation in promoting investment and supporting private sector-led growth. For their part, representatives of the World Bank and the International Finance Corporation reaffirmed their commitment to working closely with the government to expand financing and investment opportunities in line with Yemen's development priorities.
Minister of Public Health and Population Dr. Qasim Buhaiba held talks with UNICEF's new representative to Yemen, Akil Ayer, on expanding cooperation to strengthen healthcare services across the country. Dr. Buhaiba highlighted the growing challenges facing the health sector, particularly decline in humanitarian funding, stressing the government's commitment to maintaining essential health services through more efficient use of available resources and stronger partnerships with international donors. For his part, Ayer reaffirmed UNICEF's commitment to supporting Yemen's health sector with a continued focus on maternal and child health, primary health care, and strengthen the resilience of the national health system.
Meanwhile, Minister of State for Women's Affairs Dr. Ahd Jassous held talks with UNICEF to advance women's empowerment and expand their participation in leadership and decision-making. Meeting with UNICEF Deputy Representative for Programs Obeya Haroun, the minister discussed joint efforts to support women's role in development and peace building, while expanding opportunities for women and girls across economic, social, and development sectors. The UNICEF official reaffirmed the organization's commitment to working with the ministry through programs in health, nutrition, education, child protection, and gender equality, supporting Yemen's broader development and empowerment goals.
That's all for tonight. Thank you for watching and have a good time.